Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have with us Lawrence Bartley, is also known as Autistic Hypnotist, is a practicing hypnotherapist helping people overcome anxieties, insecurities, and other traumas. And we learn from him about practical techniques to quiet your inner critic, reduce sensory and social stress, and finally feel in control of your life. Welcome to the show, Lawrence.
Hello, AJ. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
You're welcome. Welcome to the show, Lawrence. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about how one can make their brain work better for them. So we'll talk about this. We'll talk about hypnotherapy. But before that, let's
Okay.
talk a bit about your background, your journey, your story, so that audience knows who they are listening to.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, my name is Lawrence Bartley, and I'm the Autistic Hypnotist because I happen to be autistic. I was diagnosed when I was about 10 years old. And as for my story into hypnosis, into hypnotherapy, well, it sort of got started because I had a lot of insecurities, a lot of anxiety, depression, all sorts of problems. I originally started learning hypnosis more for persuasion aspect of it because I had a lot of social anxiety with talking to people. Didn't really know much about communication. Part of it because of the autism, part of it because of social anxiety. So I really wanted to learn sort of like brain hacks for communicating with people better. That took me into hypnosis. Eventually, I took a hypnotherapy training. And while there, I worked with someone for the anxiety, for the insecurities, and they sort of just melted out of my system. I kept going back to hypnosis trainings and eventually decided to become a hypnotherapist called the Autistic Hypnotist because I work a lot with autistic people because a lot of autistic people have anxieties and depressions at a much higher rate than neurotypical people.
Absolutely, absolutely, Lawrence. So to understand this thing, how does this, hypnotherapy work? Because a lot of people who have been so-called diagnosed with autism and other things, they also know about or should be knowing about it. Then where do you come into the picture? How do you bring hypnotherapy into it and bring those changes into people's life?
Well, what I do is I help work with clients to sort of see. Most people have this idea that hypnosis is sort of mind controlling another person. I don't mind control people. I actually show them how to hypnotize themselves. So when I get a client who's autistic, I show them how to hypnotize themselves to get rid of their anxieties, get rid of their depressions, to help overcome all of their insecurities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Carry on, Lawrence.
Well, I'm just curious as I answer your question. Is there anything else?
No, this is fine. This is fine. We'll try and understand things from various
Yeah.
perspective in terms of so that people who are having in whatever way they can take your help, understand things better. As you said, the topic says the make their brains work best for them. So firstly, let's understand it from in terms of in terms of the dark side of the brain you talk about, how to make the dark side of the brain work for you. So let's talk about, so many people who think that they have any issue or are diagnosed with anything, a good part, if I understand, seems to be not working or not working in the way it should be working for that. What is this dark side of the brain that you talk about, Lawrence?
Yeah. So the dark side of the brain is basically all the darker aspects of us, the sort of shadow self, the part that creates all the fears and the insecurities. And like you said, the part that should be working but isn't. For example, social anxiety. Anxiety is basically not feeling safe, feeling like you're walking on eggshells the entire time, no matter where you are or who you're talking to. But in reality, we know logically it's safe. Like nothing bad's going to happen to me. Nothing bad's going to happen if I talk to you, if I go walking down the street. But somebody has anxiety, they feel like they're walking eggshells or in constant damage control mode. So that'll be the dark side of the brain. And what I do is I help teach their brain that the world is safe again. And that's pretty much, it's a bit oversimplified, but that's pretty much what I do is I teach them that the world is safe, that people are safe, that you don't have to be in damage control mode anymore, that you can just turn it off, relax, and feel safe again.
Absolutely. So, Lawrence, a lot of this anxiety, one is it's part of your being. Sometimes it can happen. You would be able to tell better. I am not a trained person in this, but to understand for the audience. But a lot of this anxiety is also from around our environment. Either a lot of it is from social media, and that is, even a very healthy person who had no history of anxiety or anything suddenly looks at one particular video or reel or anything, and it will keep on throwing many of them, and then they will feel despondent. They will feel that the world is in a difficult time. How
Yeah.
do you separate these two aspects of what you do, and how do individual understand about their anxieties from these two different aspects? One is the create artificial one, if I use that word, and one is the actual anxiety, which can be a part of the being for whatever reasons, the way you are.
Well, I would say I don't really separate the two. The reason is that if somebody has anxiety, they're walking on eggshells. Well, I don't really care if they were born with it, if they got it when they were 5 years old, or if it came from their phone. In my opinion, all anxiety is the same. It's the same part of your brain telling you that you're not safe. So I don't really do a lot to separate them. What I do is that because I tell people to hypnotize themselves, I'm getting them to sort of fix the problems themselves. So it doesn't really matter so much whether it came from, I don't know, a rough childhood where people were constantly yelling at you, so you had to walk on eggshells the whole time, or if it came from social media, seeing all these dark reels. Like I remember hearing years ago that like half of the children in the United Kingdom were having night terrors from all the climate change stories telling them that, oh, climate change is going to kill us all tomorrow. So I don't really separate whether the anxiety comes from the climate change stories on social media or the rough childhood. In my mind, it's the same part of the brain going through the same process. And I simply teach people to turn it off.
Absolutely. Let's understand things from the ground, Lawrence. What about clients? Who are the type of clients that you get? What are their general questions regarding this? So we'll understand things. How do you solve them? How do you help them change about things about their own mind until they, before meeting it, what was stopping them? And how do you induce those changes into their mind?
Okay, so the clients I work with, like I said, a lot of autistic people, a lot of neurotypical people too. And most of them come in for, like I said, for anxiety. What I usually do with those clients is my hypnotherapy work tends to be more as sort of a metaphorical journey for people. I have them create a representation of what their problem is I have them visualize what their brain represents the problem as. Because your unconscious mind, it doesn't think logically. It thinks in terms of metaphors, symbols, colors, feelings. So when you can create a metaphor for a problem, for example, one client that I worked with, well, his metaphor for his anxiety was a graveyard. It was dark, it was spooky, so we started changing the image that he had of the graveyard. And started changing it to making it brighter, making it sunny, removing the graves, putting in flowers. And suddenly, he starts to feel better because the internal representation of it through the graveyard changed. And that's what helped him to get over his anxieties.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a good way of explaining, Lawrence. Indeed. Now, in terms of then therapy itself, traditional therapy and hypnotherapy, what is the difference for an individual? Would he know without being told that he's having therapy or he's having hypnotherapy?
Well, I suppose if you told me you were doing an imagination exercise, you wouldn't really know the difference between hypnosis and imagination exercise. So a therapist could do hypnosis subtly and covertly like that. But the difference between normal hypnosis and standard therapy tends to be a lot of talk therapy, a lot of just talking about the problem, which I'm not a big fan of. I was in therapy for a while. It didn't really work for me, hence the not a big fan of it. But in my mind, talking about the problem, you go deeper into the problem, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're finding a solution to the problem. Whereas hypnotherapy, at least my work, tends to be all solution oriented. So it's all focused on creating solutions to help you overcome those problems. And there's very little talking. In fact, the work that I do is called content free. And by content free, it means I need to know I look for as little as possible details. Like some people talk about, oh, I had this horrible childhood where such and such a thing happened to me. I don't need to hear that. So I can do a lot of hypnosis work and help you solve the problem, but without knowing those darker, more personal details. So that would be the big
Absolutely.
difference between hypnotherapy and the traditional talking therapy.
Absolutely. Good. You mentioned about content free hypnotherapy, and I'm very excited, curious to understand it better, because if you don't get the details from the patient, even about the problem itself, how would you be able to give a solution? Help us understand, for a layman, common
Of
person, how
course.
do they understand content free hypnotherapy?
Of course. Well, for content free hypnotherapy, it's because, remember, like I said, hypnosis is not mind control. I'm helping you hypnotize yourself. So by doing that, you're the one creating the change. You're the one who's solving the problem. You're the one making all those changes inside your own mind. And so for content free hypnotherapy, I'm getting the clients to do as much of the work as possible. So a client will tell me that because I'm doing a lot of metaphorical work, oh, my anxiety is like a graveyard. Well, I'll just suggest, well, what would happen if you did this to a graveyard? What would happen if you made it brighter? What would happen if you added in those flowers? And by doing that, a client can tell me, all a client has to do is say, is it better? Is it worse? And then we kind of like going to an optician. Just, is it better? Is it worse? And you use that to go and find the right lens to go and look through.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, why do you think hypnotherapy, it resonates more with autistic people, autistic individuals? Where is that connection? How should a common person understand about this connection?
Okay, so the reason that I focus on autistic people is because, well, Asperger syndrome means that I have autism. But another reason is that, autistic people, we tend to have much higher rates of anxiety and depression. However, traditional therapy of just talking about the problem is I don't believe it's what we're wired for. I don't see a lot of talk therapy and traditional methods as being very helpful to autistic people. And the reason is that we're very, very logic oriented. So talking about problems is not really how we solve them. We have to actually do something and make some change. But just talking alone, I don't believe that's very effective. It certainly wasn't in my case, because I was in therapy for quite a while. Then with hypnosis, because you're working with the person, that they're making the change themselves, it can be done much faster. Most of my clients are done in 1 or 2 sessions. Whereas in talk therapy, you could be in there for 10, 12. Some people have been in therapy for years. But I find that with hypnosis, getting the person to do as much of the work themselves, you can get results much faster. And I think that's especially helpful for autistic people, given the high rates of the anxiety and depressions that we get.
Absolutely, absolutely. So if I understand, people are very anxious whenever things change in their life, and people run away from change. They just don't know how to react to change until unless it's enforced on them. If I understand, you come from a software field, and then you become a hypnotherapist. If that is correct, how did you manage
Yeah.
this part of change in your own life, especially as you said you had your own difficulties earlier on, and then managed to stick to it without feeling that much of a issue? Were you also anxious in any manner while making the help us understand from all this, for people who are anxious whenever transition happens in their life?
Okay, so like you said, I did have a software background. I went to college for software development. I was there for a couple of years. However, it didn't really appeal to me, not the way that hypnosis did. So I ended up going into it, choosing to hypnotherapy instead. And as for how I managed the change, it was a pretty big change. Uh, I did do a lot of self hypnosis work because a change from being in college to suddenly being an entrepreneur, pretty big change. So I did a lot of self hypnosis work, mostly just changing the metaphors for the problems inside my own mind and letting them resonate inside my body to get rid of all those problems and help me to remain calm and to embrace the change. And well, I suppose I just did a lot of self work.
Great, great. Thanks for sharing all those details, Lawrence. So, you have a lot of understanding about these things. For a common person, in a nutshell, would you like to share some tips and tricks for them to help them in their day-to-day life for dealing with day-to-day situation, as you all help them, help your clients, help their, through their own mind, hypnotize and achieve the results that they want. But here you would be saying it online, people would have to implement, if they can implement any of these tips and tricks.
Yeah, sure. I can share a couple of tips and tricks. But the first thing to understand about them is that hypnosis is basically an imagination game. To start thinking of hypnosis as basically an imagination game and start using the imagination for yourself. Now, like I said earlier, your unconscious mind talks in terms of symbols and metaphors. It also talks in terms of colors and feelings. And one of the easiest things that I can teach people, one of the most effective, and I do this anytime I feel stressed, is to simply close my eyes and just go into my body and actually point to where I feel the stress and point to where I physically feel it. Because all stress is energy. Energy is always moving. So I start to close my eyes and imagine what direction the energy is going. And I start to imagine it going the other way. And what happens is basically you've got an equal and opposite force, an unstoppable object and an immovable force, and clashing, and they cancel each other out. So by going inside my body and just changing the way the energy is moving to the exact opposite manner, and imagining it spinning faster and faster and bigger and brighter and stronger, or then I can cancel out the stress, and in doing so, become calm again. That is one of the fast methods. I call it a spinning technique, because you're spinning the energy in the other direction.
Absolutely, Lawrence. Now, a lot of people, uh, are their self inner critic, always thinking about something or the other, always seeing the different side of things, not the very positive side of things, and it can be a bit difficult for them to take their life forward in that backdrop. Why it happens, I don't know, but it can happen to anyone, and for some people it is a bit too much. How do people, especially in today's time when there is so much of comparison, everybody else's lives looks good, better than yours, assume presumably, and then your own mind starts telling you different things. Perhaps the way you criticize yourself, it starts accepting all that. How do I deal with my own inner critic, make it go silent, and help the good one resurface?
I do have a solution for that, and it's going to sound really strange. It's just right now, feel your tongue on the top of your mouth, on the roof of your mouth, and just let it drop. This is the strangest technique I can give people, but for some reason, I don't even know why, it works like a charm. The moment you let your tongue drop down, the inner critic tends to go silent, that inner monologue that we have. But and so that's one solution I have. I suppose another solution would actually be to change whatever you're focusing on. So, for example, one time I had my own inner critic, complaining, saying all sorts of, I'm horrible, I'm a bad person, all that self-abusing stuff. And what I did was I actually got a photo of myself from when I was a really small child, and I actually just started saying out loud all the self-abusing stuff to the photo of myself when I was younger, which is a very hard thing to do. But when I did it, I got the realization of just sort of how abusive I was being towards myself because of that inner critic. And when I got that realization, that's when things started to change for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Both the things you have spoken, those are, I think, very good ones, and very easy for people to follow. There is so much to learn about all this from you, Lawrence, and I'm sure a lot of people would want to learn more from you, about your journey and story, and also perhaps want to be your client. What's the best way for them to do so?
Oh, well, the best way, if you want to learn more about me, would be to join my email list, which is on my website, which is lawrencebartley.com. The homepage will take you to my email list. It's a daily email list. And also, if you sign up for it, there's also a free bribe of a hypnosis for sleep recording that I like to give people. So the best way to contact me would be through my website, which is, again, lawrencebartley.com. Just my name.com.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me.